The ancient civilization, having endured for millions of years, continues to orchestrate its plans in the shadows of the galaxy. The Necrons, immortal machines whose technology surpasses anything ever created by the human race. Their objectives are shrouded in mystery, yet behind each of their moves lies calculation, and behind every battle, an ancient intrigue. Today we will speak of the most enigmatic and significant figures among the Necrons. Within the ranks of Xenos, named Necrons, there exists a strict hierarchy, affecting each of their dynasties, where at the center of intricate familial ties are the Pharaons, surrounded by noble lords. Such a system has been immutable for millions of years, ever since the Necrons were called Necrontyr and were beings of flesh and blood. Although some of the Pharaons might be subordinated to other nobles by right of conquest or negotiated agreements, most of them are completely independent and proud aristocratic figures. Boundlessly confident in the undeniable authority of their power, every ruler pursues their own goals. However, all share a programmed aspiration to restore the might of their family. Yet it was not always so. Long ago, the Necrons obeyed the will of a single sovereign without question. Billions of eternally living soldiers marched victoriously throughout the galaxy, endlessly devoted to the supreme monarch Zarek, the last silent king. Above the heads of the Necrontyr dynasties is a council governing the entire race. Known as the Triarch, this assembly comprised a trinity of pharaons, each of whom in turn led their own dynasty. The greatest among them bore the title of Silent King, whose word was law to all, and those who dared to disobey him signed their own death warrant. By old tradition, the Silent King never spoke directly, so his voice was rendered by one or sometimes both of the other Triarchs. Besides them, the royal court included junior members of the nobility and advisors, astrologers, and healers. All three ruling positions were nominally hereditary, but the indefinite lifespan of the Necrontyr ensured the transition of the title of Silent King from one family to another numerous times. Thus, when Zarek took the throne, he was merely another monarch in a long succession, chosen from his native dynasty. Yet he could not have foreseen that he would become the last sovereign of the Necrontyr, as well as the first and only Silent King of the Necrons. Long before Zarek's ascension to the throne, the Necrontyr possessed a growing galactic empire, and at some point their expansion led to a situation where the supreme governing body could no longer fully enforce its laws upon widely scattered dynasties. The resulting internal conflicts ultimately led to the First Secession. In a desperate attempt to unite the fragmented people, the Triarch declared war on the Elders, a race of virtually immortal beings who refused to share the secret of longevity. Thus began the catastrophic campaign spanning eras known as the War in Heaven. The secessionist dynasties were offered amnesty and forgiveness if they stood against the Eldar. In this way, the Silent Kings of that era managed to restore unity among the Necrontyr. Yet a sense of despair veiled their eyes and prevented them from discerning the true power of their adversary. Although the conflict spread across the entire galaxy and entangled dozens of sentient species, ultimately the enemy's superiority led to the Necrontyr becoming a negligible threat and being driven into an isolated territory. It was during this period that Pharaon Zarek ascended the throne of the crumbling empire. In the conditions of the Second Secession, which erupted after a century of exhausting battles, Zarek and other members of his generation were forced to seek a new means to unite their civilization, and they found it. Although perhaps the truth was quite the opposite. It is unlikely that it will ever be known how the Necrontyr made contact with the godlike Catan. But in them, they found allies with whom victory in the War in Heaven could be achieved. Upon receiving a request from one of the Catan, Zarek invited it for an audience, and this otherworldly being promised to grant the Necrontyr the long-desired immortality as well as the power necessary to vanquish the hated Eldar, without asking for anything in return. It was a friendly offering from one ally to another. Zarek, the other members of the Triarch, and their courtiers deliberated over the tempting offer for an entire year, and only the royal astrologer Oricon the Diviner spoke against it. Ultimately, Zarek succumbed to the sweet words of the Khatan, casting aside the noble's warning in a desperate desire to mend the fractures dividing society, and in a quest to rid themselves of the age-old curse of the flesh that shortened the lives of the Necronta. Although the proclamation of the agreement was made by the Triarch, the final decision was, nonetheless, Zarek's. As soon as the Khatan revealed the form of the proposed immortality, the transformation process began, and colossal biofurnaces roared day and night across the Necrontyr Empire. Zarek's word was law, and thus all Necronta were compelled to accept the great boon whether they wished it or not. Their mortal bodies were consumed and replaced with ageless shells of living metal. Reborn, the Silent King felt far more powerful than before, and his thoughts cleared. However, a strange emptiness arose in his consciousness, a certain spiritual vacuum. Observing how the star gods gathered around the biofurnaces, greedily consuming the elusive energies being discharged, he realized he had committed a monstrous betrayal of his people. And though the Necrontyr were henceforth immune to death, they had to pay for this with their souls, as decreed by none other than Zarek himself. The biotransference endowed the Silent King with tremendous power. The set of command protocols, recorded in the matrix that now constituted his consciousness, ensured the unquestioning obedience of his subject. Though such unity initially seemed a blessing, over time it turned into a burdensome yoke, and his similar authority gradually led towards tyranny. Yet at least it allowed Zarek to implement his plans unimpeded, aimed against those he most blamed for this dreadful curse, the Khatan. The Silent King bided his time. Meanwhile, the Star Gods, in concert with the Necrons, stormed one fortress of the Elders after another until the power of the latter evaporated without a trace, and the war in heaven concluded. Exhausted by victory, the Khatan were in their weakest state, and then Zarek struck them, utilizing the combined grand hyper-technology of the dynasty. By channeling the energetic currents of the universe, he created weapons that could withstand even the Khatan. Yet millions of warriors perished, including 2 other Triarchs, and completely destroying the star spawn proved impossible. The Necrons only managed to shatter the Khatan into shards and capture their essences. Despite the defeat of the Elders and the overthrow of the Star Gods, Zarek was acutely aware that the time of the Necrons had passed, at least for now. The allies of the Elders survived the war in heaven, including the young and vengeful Asuryani, and the Silent King held no hope that his people could withstand them, considering the losses sustained in the struggle with the Khatan. However, his race no longer feared the passage of time, and thus he ordered the construction of enormous necropolis complexes. By Zarek's decree, the majority of his civilization entered the Great Sleep, to remain there for 60 million years until their enemies turned to dust. When the time came, the Necrons were to awaken and restore the reign of the dynasty. Before departing into self-imposed exile, the Silent King erased the command protocols, meaning that upon awakening, the Necrons would follow his final command, but would achieve galactic dominion as masters of their own destiny. The advanced artificial brain architecture of Zarek allowed him to experience every emotion of a truly living being. As a result, he was tormented by conscience, having condemned his kind to an eternity of immutable existence, and the guilt for his actions and the terror of such conduct would have undoubtedly driven a flesh-and-blood creature insane. In turn, the Triarch Praetorians, whose loyalty remained unshaken after the destruction of the command protocols, bore their own brand of shame, for they were tasked with preserving the dynasty, a duty in which they failed. Now, with the other Triarchs dead, they were left to revere only the Silent King, and he found a way for them to restore their honor. Zarek assigned the loyal guardians of the laws the task of standing watch over the sleeping tomb worlds, eventually facilitating their awakening and strengthening their defense. The Silent King himself took his personal funeral ship, as black as night and the size of a planetoid, and set sail into the depths of intergalactic void, presumably seeking solace or redemption there. Legions of his dynasty departed with him, laid to rest in stasis crypts just like their kin. Whatever regrets Zarek might bear, he remained the Silent King, a nobleman of incomparable lineage, and it would not befit him to face eternity without an entourage. All Necrons bear the mark of the Triarch, a brand on their living metal skin indicating their belonging to this ancient race. The Triarch was a council of 3 pharaons, of whom the Silent King was the chief. Zarek was the last of the Silent Kings, having brokered a deal with the Catan on behalf of his people, thereby both saving and dooming his race. After the Great Sleep, the Triarch is no more, yet rumors persist that the Silent King still lives and now pursues goals known only to him. The absence of the Silent King in the 41st millennium and the long years of the sleep turned the Triarchal Ankh into a reminder of faded glory. Some aristocrats see it as the cornerstone of the Necron Empire, while others regard it as a relic of a long-past era. Be that as it may, the Ankh remains a symbol of the Necron race, and even those who have lost faith in its power do not remove it from their breastplates. Each dynasty's Ankh color and some elements differ to match the ornament of their pharaon. But despite non-essential changes, the features of the Ankh remain constant. All lines and curves are precisely reproduced on the chests of the Necrons. Each dynasty also has its own glyphs, peculiar variations of the Ankh indicating which pharaon's armies the soldiers serve. Sometimes these symbols are worn alongside the Triarch Ankh, but usually they are made smaller and placed not on the breastplate, reflecting the relationship between the pharaon and the Triarch. Ordinary soldiers rarely use the dynastic symbolism in full, as most are unworthy of such honor. Instead, separate fragments of the glyph are used to signify the phalanxes. Millions of years passed, yet the galaxy continued to turn. In the cold and dark void, Zarek encountered the Tyranids and discerned the consequences of their hunger. He had hopes that the Necrons might return to bodies of flesh and blood, but if the Tyranids consumed all biomass, apotheosis would become unattainable. At that moment, the duty of the Silent King became transparently clear. He did not intend to save other civilizations, preserve their armies and cultures, but would zealously protect their biological diversity and do everything possible to ensure the Necrons collected the necessary samples for their own ascension. After all that had transpired, the subjects deserved no less from their king. Upon returning to the galaxy, Zarek found that the Tyranid threat was just one among many facing the awakening tomb worlds. Alien races swarmed over the former empire of the Necrons, while the dynasties were either frantically awakening or already warring for power. Most dire of all, the warp seeped into the material space in hundreds of places. The bonds that had long held it at bay had weakened. The Silent King secretly visited one tomb world after another, concealing his identity and acting through unsuspecting cryptex to rekindle their belief in their own supremacy. The Triarch Praetorians immediately responded to the return of the Overlord, ready and eager to magnify his influence. With the legions of his home dynasty at his disposal, Zarek had the potential to conduct large-scale campaigns, yet he only fought where absolutely necessary. and where complete annihilation of the enemies ensured further concealment of his involvement. Aware of the extent of the galaxy's destabilization, and observing the myriad dangers to his fractured people, Zarek dedicated himself to the formulation of colossal plans beyond the comprehension of younger races. He intends to shatter them and allow his people to unite against the Tyranids, and the lesser species are yet to realize that the Necrons are manipulating the fabric of reality, and that an ancient terror stalks among the stars in watchful silence. Rumors of the Silent King's return reached me, laughable and unworthy of a true ruler, skulking in the shadows, conducting behind-the-scenes maneuvers through puppets. No true king acts thusly, and if all of this is true, he is yet to learn that his time has passed. Imhotep, the Stormlord, Pharaon of the Sotek dynasty. The story of Zarek you have heard is but a part of a far more complex mosaic. Who else orchestrates the fate of this ancient race? He is called the Inescapable. He is obsessed with preserving and collecting historical values, passionately filling the vaults of his necropolises with various treasures, relics, and even living subjects such as members of an overly curious Inquisitor's retinue. His goal is to save everything in the galaxy that is worthy of enduring for centuries, and to acquire a new exhibit for his astonishing museum, even one that may seem a mere trinket to some. He is willing to obliterate entire worlds. And he is named Trazyn the Infinite. He prefers to be addressed as the Master of Rare Moments, the Lord of the Great Library, or the Keeper of History. It must not be allowed for ancient artifacts to be destroyed or lost by the uninitiated, for only through the study of such treasures will the future be conquered. Only we, who have shed the shackles of mortality and bent the vastness of the cosmos to our will, can be entrusted with such a formidable task. Trazyn is the custodian of artifacts and the past. The immense vaults of his tomb world Solemnace are overflowing with technologies so rare and advanced that any tech priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus would trade the lives of several close colleagues just to learn of their existence. In his catacombs, all manner of relics are stored. Here is the legendary choir of Altansar, made from wraithbone, and the preserved head of Sebastian Thor, the ossified shell of the Overlord, as well as the bell of St. Gersthal and a giant clad in ornate power armor, with a face distorted in an eternal scream. And this is but a fragment of the collection of Trazyn, which he has amassed over the last 60 million years. Since Trazyn remained awake, while the other Necrons slumbered in eternal sleep, among the exhibits in his museum are creatures that went extinct around 500,000 years ago, those whose loss the entire galaxy mourned, as well as other species that simply vanished without a trace. Solemnace is situated on the eastern fringes and is part of the dynasty of the Nihilak. This grey and grim tomb world is hidden in remote space, where almost complete darkness prevails, except for the cold glow of a colourless sun bathing the planet. Both celestial bodies are of artificial origin. The star is a cluster of mirrors, whose angles are precisely calibrated to capture surplus energy emerging from a powerful source within the depths of the planetoid. The planetoid itself, in turn, represents a colossal Dyson sphere, with a shell of nanomachines and an artificial atmosphere. Inside are hundreds of tiers slowly rotating around a core where a Catan is imprisoned, the jewel of Trazyn's collection and, according to him, the source of his power. However, this is not the only star god languishing in his captivity. By the end of the 41st millennium, the Archaeovist captured a shard of Nyadrazatha, the Burning One, which he arduously extracted from the depths of the planet Midgardia, located in the Fenris system. The most impressive of Solemnice's wonders are the prismatic galleries, winding halls with an extensive collection of sculptures, where events deemed worthy of eternal memory by Trazyn are recreated. The scale of compositions varies from the meeting of the last conclave of the craft world Yanden to the grand slaughter at Tragus. Among the most grandiose expositions is the subterranean war on Kull, where the word-bearers and ultramarines clashed. However, these exhibitions do not merely feature statues, but also living beings transformed into contrasting holograms through mysterious technology. Among them are genuine shapers of history, frozen in moments of triumph or defeat. Whisked away to solemnness, they stand forever as testimonials to their deeds. Among them is even the flawless clone of the Primarch Fulgrim. It was handed over by the notorious Fabius Bile in exchange for the pure gene seed of the Emperor's Children Legion, which had disappeared during the era of the Great Crusade. Thus the progenitor ransomed himself from Trazyn, who desired to claim him, or at least one of his clones, for his collection. According to Trazyn himself, centuries ago he was close to capturing another son of the Emperor, Guilliman. Moreover, before the resurrection of the Primarch in a skirmish with Captain Sicarius on the planet Veniamore, the incalculable let slip that he was considering a visit to Macragge, believing that the frozen godling of the Ultramarines would feel more comfortable in his company. Trazyn's treasures continue to grow, for history does not stand still, and accordingly he tries to keep pace with time. Unfortunately, few worlds obediently give Trazyn the artifacts he needs, selfishly hiding a few items significant to their civilization, instead of entrusting them for eternal preservation. In such cases, Trazyn has no choice but to gather his armies and obtain what he desires by force. And if it requires the destruction of a city, a planet, or even an entire sector, so be it. Trazyn views any raging war in the cosmos as an opportunity to add new specimens to his collection, for the larger the conflict, the more impressive the curiosities that can be taken. For instance, a fragment of a Doomsday blade is invaluable to Trazyn, but only on condition that this Imperial tank is shrouded in legends and famed for its feats. Such trophies are more than attractive to the ruler of Solemnness, and for them he is ready to venture into the very heart of battle, accompanied by his personal guard. Such formations, usually consisting of 5 detachments of Lich Guard with hyperface blades and dispersion shields, are called phalanxes of acquisition. If his own forces are insufficient, Trazyn resorts to assistance from other noble Necrons. For example, he allied with Imhotep the Stormlord to reach the mythical stars of Cain. When the Tyrannid Hive Fleet Behemoth invaded the galaxy and threatened Solemnas, Trazyn's eternal rival Oricon the Diviner even prophesied his demise and the destruction of his museum at the claws of the Great Devourer. However, Trazyn had to disappoint this foolish mystifier by launching decoys into deep space, resulting in the swarm bypassing Solemnes like water around a rock. Later, Oricon attempted to destroy Trazyn's gallery, orchestrating malfunctions in the stasis systems of the exhibits, considering Solemnas a blight on the galaxy, obscuring his sight. Trazyn managed to drive away the Cryptek, but since then he dreams of placing him in a diorama dedicated to the war in the museum that he instigated. Upon learning that the planet Solemnes was mysteriously bypassed by the bio-horrors of Hive Fleet Behemoth, the Inquisition questioned the reason. Inquisitor Valeria led an operational group to investigate the circumstances and uncovered thousands of wonders in Trazyn's vast galleries. However, when the astonished uninvited guests delved deeper into the planet's innards, the tomb awoke. The ensuing battle caused chaos and led to the destruction of several exhibits particularly treasured by Trazyn, forcing him to intervene personally. At the climax of the battle, Valeria shot the curator of the museum with a graviton emitter, but moments later the Overlord emerged from the shadows, unharmed and whole. Ultimately, the remnants of the group saved themselves by retreating to the shuttles, leaving Solemnus to continue guarding its secrets. Trazin saw a kindred spirit in the Inquisitor and subsequently sent her a chest, a tesseract trap. Somehow, Valeria managed to escape it and even learned to use it as a prison for her enemies. It is not known for certain what happened to her, but she likely fell victim to the Puritan Inquisitor Caterina Greyfax, who was ultimately captured by Trazin in retaliation for her murder. Among those Trazin often crosses paths with is Vulcan Hastan of the Salamanders chapter, who has already been attacked twice by the Necron overlord. During their first encounter, the stranger attempted to wrest the warrior's weapon, the Spear of Vulcan, from his hands. The Infinite is keenly desirous of acquiring this technological marvel, and it is quite possible, though not proven, that he is behind the mysterious deaths of several previous Forge Fathers. Later, the ancient Xenos tried to ensnare Hestan during a crusade, but the indomitable warrior thwarted him yet again. After the opening of the Great Rift, many believe that the devastating warp disruptions in communication and travel have rendered the search for Hestan impossible. However, it was in this darkest hour that a new clue emerged, a bright ember in the darkness of the Imperium Nihilus on a world called Null, an ember hinting at the location of another Primarch artifact known as the Free Flame. And only time will tell if Trazin had a hand in this yet again. Occasionally the living statues in the galleries are shattered by a malfunctioning Canoptech wraith crashing into them, a ceiling collapse, or, as in the catastrophic case described earlier, a shootout between Trazin's subordinate warriors and the entourage of an overly curious Inquisitor, most of whom now form a separate composition on one of the upper floors. Such incidents cause Trazin annoyance, as he has to pause the search for new valuable acquisitions and find replacements for the lost ones. Of course, few statues are replaceable, but Trazin sets the standards in his museum himself. Therefore, if he decides that one of the contrasting pieces will fulfill its purpose even with a replica, however inaccurate it might be, he will undoubtedly acquire it. For example, 1/10 of his exhibit, The Death of Lord Solar Macarius, consists of holographic Imperial Guardsmen whose military uniforms differ by 300 years from historically accurate ones. But Trazin cares only about spectacle, not details like laces and patches. If Trazin plans to update his museum, he urgently seeks out armies engaged in military campaigns, vulnerable garrisons, or populated worlds with flaws in planetary defense. Depending on the extent of the damage inflicted upon the exhibition, replacement specimens can be assembled in just a few spans of nocturnal low-level sweeps, although occasionally it becomes unavoidable to mobilize more substantial forces for a detailed analysis and cataloguing of the planetary population. Tomb worlds are also not overlooked by Trazin, as he believes other Necrons to be less reliable than outsiders when it comes to preserving the artifacts he so passionately collects. For this reason, Trazin makes little distinction between valuable items contained within alien worlds or those in the possession of his fellow kin. As a result of such liberations from careless hands, he has become persona non grata on several tomb worlds. Under the threat of death, he is forever forbidden from appearing in the catacombs of Mandragora due to his long-standing attempt to secretly steal the Staff of Destruction belonging to Imhotep. However, Trazin is warmly welcomed every time, under the strict condition that his arrival somehow fortifies the dynasty's positions. These instances somewhat explain why Trazin rarely travels under his own name, resorting to pseudonyms to conceal his identity. He considers the names he has devised to be artful manifestations of deceit, though in truth they are simply borrowed from ancient Necron myths or fairy tales. The fact that Trazin is rarely exposed before he makes his move speaks more to the insularity and narrow-mindedness of other Necron nobility than to his ability to deceive opponents. And although his plans rarely turn out as cunning as he would like to think, Trazyn nonetheless has mastered the art of operating through thralls infected with nanoscarabs. If he needs to be present somewhere in person, then, living up to his name, he relocates his consciousness from one Necron host to another. Even on Orc planets, in Tau-sept worlds and human colonies where Trazyn operates strictly through brainwashed puppets, he strives at all costs to keep his identity a secret. He is well aware that his activities have attracted the attention of some rogue traders and inquisitors, which was simply inevitable, as the intricate history of the Imperium irresistibly draws in a collector like Trazyn. And although he remains confident in his ability to fool the primitive humans attempting to ensnare him, a healthy paranoia aids him in observing proper precautions. Trazyn typically conducts reconnaissance and directs campaigns through surrogates, bodies into which he invests his will. In the event of catastrophic damage, Trazyn's essence simply returns to his true shell or moves to another surrogate. Many surrogates are genuine Necron lords or overlords whose bodies without their knowledge were seized by Trazyn. Consequently, not all of Trazyn's guises are easily recognized at first glance. If he needs to take possession of someone's body, he can do so as easily as with any other surrogate. The victim's consciousness is suppressed for the duration of Trazyn's temporary use, and its shell is immediately transformed into an exact replica of the original, if necessary. Thus, shielded from any dangers of the galaxy, Trazyn can venture wherever he pleases. In cases where the transplantation of consciousness may be complicated, Trazyn resorts to another ruse. He transforms the available surrogate shells, but does not attempt to transfer into one of them. Instead, he appears on the battlefield accompanied by his exact replicas, thereby complicating his opponent's task of killing him. Although Trazyn the Infinite officially obeys the esteemed Nihilak dynasty, his dynastic affiliation seems to mean little to him, and it remains questionable, perhaps even to himself. Instead of the Ankh on the chest, Trazyn wears the familial glyph of Nezarec, which among the Necrons is considered an audacious gesture, even though the Triarchies have long ceased to be. However, given Trazyn's transformation abilities and duplicitous nature, it is impossible to say for certain whether he is a descendant of Nezarec, evidently conquered by the Nihilak dynasty, considering Trazyn's vassal dependency, or if he simply pretends to be. Trazyn is armed with the empathic obliterator. The exact origin of this unusual staff remains a mystery to everyone except Trazyn, but rumours suggest it is partly a product of technology devised by the long-vanished Old Ones. When the empathic obliterator claims an enemy's life, a psionic shockwave radiates from the fallen body, killing all nearby beings with similar consciousness and intentions. Thus it is the perfect weapon for a being like Trazyn, who scorns exhausting physical combat and prefers to deliver a single powerful strike at the opportune moment. Of late, Trazyn has been obsessively taking steps to preserve ancient items of interest to him. The days when caution and meticulous planning were necessary are swiftly passing. The tumultuous clamour of battles grows louder in all corners of the galaxy, engulfing temples, cities, planets, and even entire civilizations much sooner than Trazyn has the chance to catalogue and salvage everything worthy of it. The fiercer the war blaze burns, the more decisive the measures he takes for the preservation of the galaxy's greatest treasures. And now, for the first time in millions of years, Trazyn is mobilizing the entire might of the Solemnus legions to protect various planets from the onslaught of ignorant barbarians, while conducting thorough cultural research. Consequently, Trazyn's forces have already occupied many worlds of the Imperium, where the local inhabitants are enslaved by his relentless minions. And it seems the Solemnus legions do not intend to stop there. It is impossible not to mention the events that describe Trazyn better than any other facts. After the invasion of Hive Fleet Behemoth, xenobiologists and inquisitors of the Imperium were left with numerous unresolved mysteries. The search for answers to one such question led Inquisitor Valeria to Solemnas, as she sought to understand why this tomb world remained untouched, when every other planet in the path of the Hive Fleet now lay in ruins. Nothing could have prepared Valeria for what she discovered in the silent darkness beneath the craters of the lifeless surface of Solemnes. Endless catacombs filled with advanced technologies and long-lost artifacts from Imperial history, along with a vast gallery of intricate holographic sculptures, life-sized and frozen in bizarre scenes from historical events. Valeria's team only had a short time to be awed by the witnessed wonders before the tomb world awakened and turned in displeasure at the uninvited guests. Wave after wave of Canoptek scarabs and Necron warriors advanced from all sides. The very air howled from the firing Gauss rifles. Trying to seize the initiative to save her surrounded subordinates, Valeria launched an attack against the shadowy figure directing the carnage. Carefully aiming, Valeria discharged a pulse from the graviton emitter that turned the Necron Lord into a twisted and melted heap of metal. But in just a moment, an identical figure emerged from the darkness, whole and unharmed. This time Valeria plunged a dagger into the heart of the enemy, but before the sparking body of her opponent could even hit the floor, yet another Necron Lord emerged, crushing the faceless remains at her feet. Valeria then ordered a retreat to the shuttles. Only a handful of the expedition's members survived and reached their destination, but empty-handed. To Valeria's great disappointment, the tomb world of Solemnes continues to guard its secrets to this day. The next event occurred in the year 933 of the 41st millennium. A Necron fleet under the command of Trazyn the Infinite arrives on the planet Midgardia, located in the Fenris system. The Overlord seeks to find a shard of the Catan that sleeps at the heart of the world. Enraged by the enemy's audacity, Logan Grimnar leads a vast army against the Necrons. The poisonous jungles and underground cities of Midgardia become the field of a fierce battle. The year 943 of the 41st millennium. Tok'ran Crusade. Trazyn the Infinite declares that he has found the Song of Entropy, one of the lost artifacts of the volcano, leading to a decade-long war between the Salamanders and the Necrons of Solemnes. It turns out that Trazyn was bluffing to lure Histan into a trap, and again attempted to eliminate the Forgefather to claim the coveted Spear of Vulcan. Knee-deep in the remains of their foes, the 6th Company Space Marines fight back-to-back, continuously fending off the surrounding Necrons with bolters and flamers. Throughout the battle, 40 battle brothers perish, but ultimately Histan prevails against Trazyn once more. In the subsequent event in the history of Trazyn, the Infinite learns that a sparsely populated Imperial garrison world conceals an ancient secret. Deep beneath the planet's main defensive structure, Fort Hallstatt, also known as the Traitor's Gate, lies buried a centuries-old crypt made of wraithbone, hidden away for some past transgression. Inside it, as Trazyn discovered, are the Stars of Cain. Though they appear as intricately crafted gemstones, they are, in truth, a terrifyingly powerful weapon of the Eldar, forged during the war in heaven. To achieve his objective, Trazyn proposes an alliance to Imhotep the Stormlord and Urban the Merciless, Lord of the Tomb World Zidaron, promising to give each of them one legendary star if they assist him in acquiring them. Trazyn cares little about the destructive potential of the Stars of Cain, being interested only in their exotic nature. In truth, he intends to steal the artifacts given to his allies in the event that they are foolish enough to actually use them as weapons. Thus the Necrons set out to attack the unsuspecting Imperial garrison on Vaniamor, intending to conduct a precisely planned raid and ultimately lay their hands on the stars of Cain. However, their plans did not account for the intervention of the Eldar. I hope these events allow you to envision what Trazyn is capable of in pursuit of artifacts for his collection, as these may not be mere trinkets for their owner, but part of something greater that we may learn about in the future. Now, let us delve into the past, into the darkest secrets where a power capable of destroying the galaxy itself lies hidden. For we shall next discuss the enigmatic Void Dragon, which may have been the cause of the rise of the Mechanicus, and how this is connected to the Emperor himself. Who or what is the Dragon of Mars, imprisoned within the labyrinth of night on the Red Planet? Although various sources have long indicated that a shard of the Catan Void Dragon resides on Mars, playing a key role in the rise of the tech cult, the misunderstanding persists that it had no influence at all, and its presence in the foremost forge world of the Imperium is nothing more than unsubstantiated rumor. It is time to reveal the truth, no matter how inconvenient it may be for anyone. The first source to offer ominous hints about the machine god is the Codex, Necrons, 3rd edition. Initially, the article Necron Mysteries stated that the Mechanicus worshipped their deity long before the arrival of the Emperor, and finally there is the machine god whom the Adeptus Mechanicus venerates. In the theology of the Imperium of the Amnisti, there is merely one aspect of the God-Emperor. This doctrine is so deeply ingrained in the minds of all who are acquainted with it that it elicits no questions. Yet the oldest records of the Mechanicus claim that on Mars, the machine god was worshipped long before the Emperor declared his reign on Terra. They speak of the incredible knowledge that humanity acquired during the golden age of technology, which nevertheless led to humanity's fall into the age of strife. The mere existence of such heresy in the very heart of the Imperium is monstrous. However, what remains hidden may be even more terrifying. Further in the short story, Vision of the Sleeping God, Abaddon the Despoiler receives intriguing information from a demon about what is situated on Mars. Of course, one might argue that demons always lie. However, such a powerful sorcerer is quite capable of compelling a scion of chaos to tell the truth. Moreover, the veracity of what was said was confirmed by information from other sources. In the shadow of Terra, beneath mountains of mist, a new form of death slumbers. Humans are sacrificed, but the precious souls are not devoured. They are cast aside to drift with the current. Many demons gather for this feast, like scavengers savouring the scraps from a rich table. Zaraphiston turned to Abaddon. Mars lies in the shadow of Terra, and the mountains of mist are Noctis Labyrinthus, if our auguries are correct. The Despoiler nodded and fixed his gaze upon the demon, which cowered beneath him. "Show us what is on Mars." The demon lost its clarity of form, and in its place a bloody mirror emerged. The traitor Astartes beheld an enormous basalt chamber, filled around its perimeter with silvery machines that rose high up. On the floor stood a sarcophagus of adamantium and gold. From each machine in turn, a beam of incredible energy arced into the sarcophagus. Beyond the chamber of summoning, the Astartes of the Black Legion heard a sound that was most rare here, the laughter of Abaddon. Finally, in the story Interrogation of Adept Cortez I, the unfortunate tech adept recounted how he ventured into the lair of the extra-dimensional and made a shocking discovery. Cortez I shuddered as the memories flashed before his eyes. "I beheld the lord of this place, and the moment my gaze fell upon him, I understood that I was doomed. But not to die, rather to comprehend the full depth of mysteries surrounding me. The machine god, do you understand? He is everywhere. He fed upon us. I saw my expedition companions on Telmax offered to the machines. Their bodies and souls were decomposed into components and fed to the machine god. Why I was returned back to the normal world I do not know. and now I understand everything in which I believed is a lie. The machine god does not love us, and he does not need our worship. We are his toys, and I do not wish to be tainted by such evil." Cortes I realized that the machine god was akin of the extra-dimensional, as he too commanded the machines. I alone survived among all, but when I awoke and discovered that I had been transported beyond the Emperor's light, I saw scenes of utter chaos. Living obelisk machines emitting torrents of lightning into the skies, horizons reaching upward and around, a surface encompassing an enormous red sun, but it was so close it seemed one could touch it. The sun hung like a malignant red eye in the firmament, and the machines fed on its endless energy like eerie parasites. Shortly before the release of the Necron Codex 3rd edition, materials discussed the Martian Gambit, a bid by 5 Necron ships to break through to Mars. However, preparations concluded in the year 998 of the 41st millennium, when 5 Shrouds executed a suicidal assault on Mars. It is unknown why the Necrons made this precise strike. The Adeptus Mechanicus, after deliberations on this event, declared the area around the Noctis Labyrinthus a zone of exclusion due to the insistence of the entire Skitarii Legion. With the publication of the Necron Codex, a frightening explanation for this raid surfaced. The Necrons attempted to liberate a void dragon. Several years later, MacNeil writes the book Mechanicum for the Horus Heresy series. It narrates that once the dragon rampaged on ancient Terra before the Emperor defeated and imprisoned it on Mars during the times preceding the Age of Strife. The dormant dragon influenced the inhabitants of Mars through dreams, granting them knowledge and leading to the formation of the Mechanicum. The book presents several indications that the dragon of Mars is Catan Magladroth. Firstly, the dragon once dwelled in space among the stars. Secondly, one of the dragon's guardians asks if certain others have devoured all the stars, which might hint at the Catan and their tendency to consume stars. Thirdly, another guardian recognizes the dragon of Mars as an incredibly ancient, powerful, exotic life form that birthed an entire civilization and then destroyed them on a whim. Fourthly, the dragon's memories indicate it once fought against its kind, which weakened it and forced it to flee to Terra. The Catan, in the later times of the war in the heavens, fought amongst themselves, consuming the weak. This can also hint at the Necron uprising against the star gods. Fifthly, the description of the dragon states its chest glowed with the light of the stars it had consumed, again pointing to the Ingir, devourers of stars. Sixthly, during the battle with the Emperor, the dragon's skin was described as silver in colour, harder than steel. Yet when struck forcefully enough, it quivered like liquid mercury. By all indications, this is necrodermis, from which the bodies of the Catan are composed. A fairly clear picture emerged, but when the 5th edition was released, the information was partially rewritten, and many materials were questioned. However, over the years, the relevance of most of the information about the Catan from the 3rd edition was confirmed by new works, with the caveat that in several episodes now featured shards, not entire star gods. As for the Void Dragon, the fact that its shard is located on Mars was confirmed in the book Mechanicum's World by Ben Counter. Barcida, which the Imperium managed to stop at the cost of the life of an entire Space Marine chapter, was heading toward Mars by the will of its master Hykeroth, who intended to awaken a shard of the Void Dragon on the Red Planet. As the sergeant approached the enigmatic structure, lights flickered at the base of its wall, assembling figures in the air akin to a holographic projection. Glowing spheres surrounded by Necron glyphs formed a star system, as Faraji discerned. The yellow orb at the very centre represented the Sun, and myriad colourful planets orbited it, each with its own glyphs apparently revealing the world's name. The scouts dispersed throughout the hall, checking each corner for hiding enemies. Besides the structure in the centre, the room was otherwise empty, and Faraji surmised it had been deserted for a long time. Brother Kazin stepped into the projection, and as the lights danced upon him, the sergeant realized that the image emanated from the eyes of the Necron statues. "Brothers, let us conduct a quick analysis," Faraji said. "What do you see?" "Certainly not the Varv system," Neilhar confidently declared. "It has 11 planets and no gas giants of this size." "Then what is it?" "Nothing of the sort comes to mind from the battle annals." "No, the history of our order is irrelevant here," Kazin contradicted, gazing at the slowly drifting planets towards them. "This is something from a sacred text." A bifurcated red line meandered around the room, forming a route leading from above to the system at the center of the hologram. "It was the course of a spacecraft. 9 planets," began the sergeant. "A star in an intermediate stage of evolution, 4 gas giants, an icy rocky chunk on one edge, which hardly qualifies as a planet, a scorched stone sphere on the other, followed by a poisonous sphere, and then a world every human would instinctively recognize. Do you not recognize it, brothers?" "The solar system," Faraji said. The sergeant approached the 3rd planet from the sun, which had an unusual appearance, all blue and green, strangely composed of land and oceans. However, if one were to remove the ocean land, char it black and scarred, and impose a massive blotch from a continent-sized structure resembling a blister, it would instantly become astonishingly familiar. "This is Terra," Faraji nodded. "The Earth, and this here is Mars." The astral knight pointed to the rust-red sphere of the 4th planet. In the illustrations, it at least resembled more of its current self, except it lacked only the colossal forges beside Mount Olympus and the orbital docks for the line fleet. The spacecraft spiraled towards the heart of the star system and halted at the red planet, around which glyphs immediately bloomed. "They are heading to Mars," Kasim was horrified. "A forge world?" Samal inquired, puzzled. "What else?" Faraji said. "It is the tomb of the Barsida lords. Here they recorded their purpose, to deliver the forge world to Mars." "You think you're the master of Barsida?" Turekin challenged. "It is he who governs you. He cannot be diverted from his path. What will become of you when he leads you to the destination? Do you suppose what lies on Mars will welcome you as a liberator? It will tear you apart. It will destroy you who have not venerated him, who continue to deceive your kin." Fekaroth launched another volley of necrodermis knives from his chest and severed Turakin's 2nd arm, causing it to fall with a spray into the mud. Screeching with servo motors, Turakin's legs buckled, and he collapsed into the riverbed. "Do you hear me, people?" Turakin loudly proclaimed. "Barsida will end its journey. Your red world will fall. Your blue world will fall. Your race will dwindle when my dynasty arrives." Fekaroth formed an enormous necrodermis blade around his hand and plunged its end into Turakin's neck. The vocal emitters abruptly fell silent. The head, completely detached, fell into the mire and vanished within its foul depths. What conclusion can be drawn? The Dragon of Mars, a mighty shard of the Void Dragon, managed to escape capture by the risen Necrons, but weakened and forced to feed on the life energy of mortals upon ancient Terra. It was bested by the Emperor, and in the times before the Age of Strife, was imprisoned on Mars in the Maze of Night, constructed by the Necrons, possibly as a prison for a Catan shard. The fragment Magladroth, likely during the Dark Age of technology, influenced humans and bestowed various wonders upon them, as it did in later periods. During the Age of Strife, under the influence of the Void Dragon Shard on Mars, the religion of the Techno-priesthood was formed. Perhaps its establishment was orchestrated by the Emperor from its inception. Millennia later, the Necrons repeatedly attempted to break onto Mars to free the Shard of Magladroth, and their schemes related to this surely bode ill for humanity. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell to avoid missing new stories about the grim future. Thank you for being with us, and until we meet again in the world of Warhammer 40,000.